I'd like to maybe start off, if that's okay, with getting a little bit of background. If you could give the audience a bit of background on your teams and how they're structured. Sylvanas, if we could maybe start with you, if that's okay. Gentlemen first, I guess, because we're a panel of female.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for the intro. So my name is Sylvanas. I am based in Singapore. I got my Twitter Love Singapore shirt, t-shirt on. So I'm currently the director of engineering for the APAC Engineering Center here in Twitter. We are about 100 engineers, data scientists, product folks distributed across our tech hubs in Singapore and India, and a handful in Australia and Japan as well. And of course, our teams work closely with our global engineering teams in the US, in the UK, and elsewhere. So here in APAC, the teams really work on all aspects of Twitter's products, including consumer experience, machine learning, data platform, and even traffic and network engineering to keep the lights on. Apart from my day job at Twitter, I'm also the co-founder of an enterprise AI company called Basis AI, which I actually co-founded in Singapore to help companies accelerate the path to productionization for AI applications. And then before moving to Singapore, really in 2018, to co-found this company, I was in the Bay Area for 12 years. And I was actually fortunate to be part of many high growth companies, such as Dropbox and Uber. At Uber, actually, particularly, that was my first experience in managing globally distributed teams as the director of data science. And the teams were really spread out in San Francisco, New York, Bangalore. So again, this topic is timely. I'm really passionate about building high performing engineering teams at scale, right? And believing that really decentralization can be a compounding advantage for any kind of high performing engineering organization. So glad to be here.
You don't give away too much yet. Swara, how about you? What's it like at Stripe?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm the data science manager at Stripe. Been here for a little under a year. At Stripe, we build programmable infrastructure to facilitate the movement of money. So it involves multiple solutions, including payments, but not just payments. And I've previously worked in other early age startups as well as large multinationals. So just like Sylvanas, been through different variations of geographically distributed companies, but I'm currently located in Singapore and I lead Stripe data science at Singapore.
Nice. And Sweta, can you talk through more on Red Hat?
Sure. So first of all, I'm Shweta. I'm Director Engineering and Site Leader at Red Hat Bangalore, India. It's a pleasure to be with you here, but a little bit more about myself. As you know, Red Hat is a truly open source organization. So not only do we have a global team spread across all parts of the world, and even remote people working together with us, but we are truly open source communities. So working across the world with communities, with partners, and with customers equally. Prior to Red Hat, I worked for almost around 18 years with Cisco. So I've been across in the journey of having had traditional software, hardware systems to a completely cloud-based systems. So understanding how do we work in a global environment, working with global teams in different kinds of software industries, be it the traditional or be it the modern. So it's a pleasure being with you and looking forward for the panel.
Yeah, I'm actually going to stick with you if that's okay. I'll dive into the first piece is around why do decentralized teams? What's the value?
I would say, we cannot contain talent within a single boundary of an organization. And really, a decentralized team unlocks our ability to tap into the potential across the globe, across the world. So you have the best of the talent coming across from various different parts of the world coming together, working together in a cohesive environment. Second, you have different perspectives and ideas coming through. So it's pretty much like today we keep talking about having diverse teams in order to bring in the various perspectives. In a very similar way, the decentralized teams just brings in the various aspects together. The second part of it is, I think, when we look at decentralized teams, means, of course, the talent is the main aspect. The second aspect which we talk about is in certain functions, it's very important that we have round-the-clock support for our customers. How do we actually enable this for our customers to have a fantastic experience through the systems? So I would say a lot of things in terms of time zone experience, in terms of talent, coming together really works well with the decentralized system.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, all right. And Sylvanas, how about you?
Yeah, I think Sweta covered a lot of the main points. Talent obviously is number one, right? I think there's this realization now that great talent is not constrained to one single geography. In fact, it's globally distributed. So for us, actually today is a proud moment because at Twitter, we just announced the official opening of our Canada International Hub. And this complements our international sites in Singapore, in Bangalore, and in London, right? So this is a company where we actually went out on record to say that our ambition is to increase our impact by enabling anyone, anywhere to work for the company. And to do that, it means that we must be able to tap into global talent regardless of location, right? And also as a chance to kind of build more diverse pools, right, which is an area of great priority for us. And then the second benefit, I think, is, as Sweta mentioned, right, follow the sun operations. At a company like Twitter, for example, we are always keeping the lights on, right? We serve the service is available 24/7. So teams such as SRE or even traffic engineering, the fact that we're distributed in Europe, in APAC, and in US just helps us ensure that there's always time zone coverage, and this has actually turned out to be a major kind of strategic advantage, right? As we are able to scale to meet the huge spikes in demand. And then the third one, which I think Swara will also be able to touch on more, because I think Stripe is really the leader in a lot of this, is just the sense that if you have global teams or you have teams in every region that you have customers, it just gives you a lot more empathy, and so you're able to have boots on the ground and able to build your companies and your products and your services to better reflect your audience, right? By bringing in and leveraging the local context and cultural insights. So for us at Twitter, 80% of our users are outside of the US. So it actually is imperative for us to be able to build teams that are able to serve these markets. And in fact, at Twitter, we are looking to better serve emerging markets like India, like Nigeria, places in sub-Saharan Africa. And we're thinking of how we want to build our engineering and product teams there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and we had Jesse Link talking through about the London office and the piece on Twitter globally of what it's like. So it is fascinating the way Twitter are moving towards decentralized teams globally. And Swara, as Sylvanas mentioned, how is it for you from a local point of view? Why would you promote the benefit of decentralized teams?
Yeah, I think in addition to everything we've spoken, one other benefit in my mind is the locally relevant products that you can build with much greater efficiency if you have decentralized teams. I think tech companies today, whenever they're looking to launch in a new market or maybe grow in a certain market, it's very important to get the right product market fit and to offer relevant solutions that are relevant to the population locally. And sometimes customizing existing solutions is probably not enough, right? Sometimes it requires building entirely new solutions from scratch. And that's where decentralized teams add incredible value. So for an example, at Stripe, we've always been strongly positioned in the credit card space, but the credit card penetration in APAC is extremely low. So if we were to really do well in APAC, we would have to build products, payment methods, like let's say support e-wallets, digital payments, direct debits, all of those things that are more relevant to the APAC payment ecosystem, rather than just customizing our existing credit card applications that we have already built globally. So I think building locally relevant problems is a great way for decentralized teams to get started. And in addition to that, I think companies like Stripe can also empower local APAC businesses to grow globally, which means we build hyper-local solutions, but we enable their growth globally as well.
You're muted.
Apologies. And what are the challenges at Stripe?
Oh, the challenges, I think are a few, but I think the first one I'll probably, that comes to my mind is the cross-pollination of knowledge, which means we have to make sure that if each decentralized team is working in a relatively autonomous manner, we are still cross-pollinating knowledge across different teams, different areas, so that as an organization, we're still sharing ideas and learning. And that same thing benefits individuals as well, because that makes sure that individuals get enough visibility as well as acknowledgement of their work outside of the immediate regional team.
Yeah, no, interesting. And Sweta, what would you have anything to add on the risks from your perspective?
I would say just like time zone is a fantastic advantage, it's equally a risk or a challenge to face in decentralized team. Imagine someone in New Zealand working with someone in the US in probably a central time zone period. And it's really difficult to match the communication and to keep in sync. So I think it has a lot of challenges in trying to just get over the different time zones as much as it's an advantage. I think the other aspect, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but something which we need to kind of iron out is how do we want the tools and processes set up in decentralized teams to enable? And sometimes just ironing things out is equally a challenge between all the global teams just to get this decentralization working together.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting. I guess I'll just take a quick second to say to people, if anyone has any questions to ask the team here, please do bring it in, because I know there's probably a lot of people that do work with decentralized teams. I think most engineering companies and designers are working globally. So if you have any thoughts, ask the speakers and we can go from there. Yeah, I'll move on to teams and structure, because there is the age-old question of culture and everything of can you get people on board globally if they are decentralized? Sylvanas, I'll ask you, how does the structure of your team work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's not all just like roses and butterflies, right? There's a lot to overcome. So the one thing I always am mindful about is that we have to be really intentional as a culture, right? In investing in a decentralized model. It can't just be an afterthought. You can't just say, oh, let's hire up a team working on XYZ in this location. I think we have to be thoughtful, and that's what we have done. When we think about setting up these various sites, there are various models that could work, right? Whether it's sister teams in different locations that are working on a common surface area, and then you define the kind of asynchronous handoffs and how you're going to ship code effectively in that model. I've seen some companies adopt a center of excellence model as well. So one site is known, for example, in its prowess in mobile engineering, or in the case of Twitter, we've kind of tried to cluster the teams in Asia Pacific to work on various aspects of machine learning, data platform, data engineering, right? In part because of the high grade kind of talent in that specialization that we're able to find. So I think A is really just being very intentional about how we are going to set up these teams. And then as Sweta talked about, how do you then have the tools and the processes to overcome the challenges that you will face, right? In terms of time zones and asynchronous handoffs. So again, going back to the team at Twitter, we really started with that nexus of kind of machine learning data platform, but as we scaled, we were able to bring in more teams, right? Once we reached critical scale. So now we have about probably over 100 engineers in the region. And so we're able to invest in more adjacencies. So for example, we spun up a traffic and network engineering team. Now we actually have teams that cover a large part of the product. So we even have teams working on the new moonshots, right? As Twitter is thinking about reinventing its product. So it's been heartening and encouraging to just kind of see the trajectory that we've taken with the Asia Pacific site.
And yeah, and Swara, what about you? What from a data perspective, what is it like with your team?
Yeah, one other thing that I've seen works particularly well in terms of team structure is making sure that different roles are represented within this decentralized team. So we do have enough engineering, data science, product, design folks from different roles within the same working group. And I think that cross-functional working group really leads to autonomy. I've seen that if there are only few aspects of people, there can be times when you're still blocked on another decentralized team or waiting on someone else. So that works particularly well at Stripe. We do have a lot of cross-functional teams, and we have representation from various different roles. And that's when we all work on a problem together and can develop code and ship it sooner.
Yeah, and so what else? I'll ask you around, how do you convince management to set up a team in a decentralized location? Has that been difficult for you?
Actually, it's not been so difficult because I think one of the interesting things is when we have communities or open source communities across the world, you understand and recognize that the talent pool is something which you need to tap into. So convincing management that the talent pool is available throughout the world is a very easy job per se from that standpoint. But once you convince that there's a talent pool, how do you go forward in establishing this talent pool and actually locating these decentralized offices and making them work? That's a much bigger challenge, I would say. The second aspect is, of course, we would say that, do you have to convince management on the cost effectiveness on the decentralized teams or on the performance or the effectiveness of the decentralized team? That comes secondary, because once you look at the talent pool which is there, which you want to tap into, it's a much more easier job in trying to overcome the rest of the challenges. So I would say talent pool is the convincing factor for most teams to set up decentralized across the different global centers. So that's where the crux or the core of the matter lies.
Yeah, and Sylvanas, how is it for you? How do you convince management to set up decentralized teams?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I was fortunate to experience is that I feel like at Twitter, which I've been here for the last year, and explicitly I was attracted to this role because of the commitment to decentralization, right? Even when in the early innings of the pandemic, Twitter was very quick to kind of double down on its commitment to building, and it's not just globally distributed teams, it's also the commitment to remote work. So we said that anyone should have the option of not ever having to set foot into the office, right? And this is something that we take quite seriously. So with this kind of backdrop, I think the culture is set, right? That there's this recognition that talent is globally distributed. We need to be able to attract the best people. We need to scale our processes, our systems, and our culture, right, to fast forward to a future where it's really decentralized. And again, I think that there are challenges to overcome. We talked about a couple of them. One is ensuring that teams can ship effectively and with high velocity, right, even in a decentralized setup. Ensuring that your tools, right, are able to scale, right? So it's not just, we will hopefully get more chance to dive into, technologies that we've used to really reduce friction in terms of the collaboration, right, of these teams. But it's also things like the tech stack, right? If you have a very monolithic architecture, it makes it really difficult for different engineering teams to ship effectively because they always are blocked on, each other's work. So how do you refactor your tech stack to enable a world where different teams are unblocked and they're able to kind of collaborate effectively? And that could be a upfront engineering investment that you have to make. So kind of going back to your question, I think at Twitter, we're fortunate to be able to say that this is something we want to solve for, and we are prepared to kind of make the investments in technology, in processes and systems to get there. And then from there on, my job is really to work with engineering leadership to try to understand which teams would be ripe for bringing to the various sites. How can we situate these teams for success? So we talked about clustering people of similar skills together where it makes sense. And this is also great for the site because it helps build a kind of reputation for what that site is known for, and it's great for kind of internal kind of positioning as well as storytelling. But B, it also provides more opportunities for skills transfer and mobility between teams for the engineers that are going to be hired into your site. So I think again, to to kind of wrap up, I would say that it's important that the company recognizes that this is a commitment they want to make, and then having site leads in place, right, and actually hiring for people who can then help to navigate, right, the different complexities of what kinds of teams to set up. How do we make sure that we have a strong hiring bar? How do we make sure that these teams have strong culture that maps to, you know, the global engineering culture, and then making sure that we scale those teams according to what we think makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And Sweta, I saw that you were nodding there. Do you think you can do this decentralized teams with the monolithic stack?
That's something which I really faced at Cisco. I would say that Cisco came, we were in digital video software, and it was a completely monolithic stack with, means not in the modern software sense, but completely hardware, software related, and one single. What becomes very interesting is, while we'd like to put in the modern practices and refactor the code like Sylvanus said, there will be a period of time when you have to deal with monolith. And how do you have the decentralized team deal with this monolith of code? And here is where I would say that there is no silver bullet, but it becomes very important that while, even if in a monolith, first of all, you do have modular functions with this monolith does. So it becomes very important for this decentralized team to pick up one of the functional areas within this monolith and go forward. The second is the contracts or the negotiations of how this software will work between each other is very, very important. It's pretty much like a waterfall model. You have to upfront communicate that this is where, this is how my software will start working when I put in this piece of code, let's assume. So there's a lot of negotiation and contract before the teams actually go away and do their bits and put it on together. And finally, when the entire piece of software comes, the integration is in a monolith a little more tedious, to say the least, because you're working not in a completely system which is working all the time and where the decentralized teams can visualize it. So sometimes monoliths do have the overhead of trying to have the upfront contracts in place, trying to bring things together and working through the testing systems and the integrations and all of that. It's possible, but I would say suggest to teams who are in monoliths to do a continuous refactoring into the modern software practices.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. And it kind of leads on to the next piece around decision making. Swara, I'll ask you if that's okay. How at your team are goals and the roadmap set out for your team?
Yeah, the decision making is definitely something that needs to be done with deliberation. I think one model that I've seen works particularly well is when the strategy principles of the entire organization are laid out in advance. These, in my mind, these are basically, it's a fundamental vision of where the company wants to go. And that should be done at the organizational level. After that, which is how to achieve this vision, is where decentralized teams can sort of decide their own strategy, decide their own goals and roadmaps. And I've seen that works particularly well when the where is sort of aligned across the teams. How to get there is definitely something we should give the teams autonomy on. And one thing that I think within that works well is once the distributed team has decided their strategy and their roadmap, let's say for the next 6 months, each sub-team or each cross-functional working group can then break that down into individual projects or items, and they should have the autonomy to pivot or change some of these implementation details, as long as the overall vision is still aligned. So that basically ensures that we have alignment, but we have enough flexibility to make changes on the ground as possible.
You're on mute.
How do you ensure, Sylvanus, to avoid, when you're talking about decision making, how do you ensure within the Twitter team that you avoid conflict?
Yeah, I think Swara mentioned a lot of great points that that we definitely try to adopt as well. I think what I have to add is, just have really clear drivers decision makers and make sure it's well defined, write down everything, right? Because in an asynchronous environment, you got to make sure you have artifacts and documents that that clearly index, how decisions are being made and what action items need to be taken. I think we've also gotten to the habit of recording our meetings because we cannot make the assumption that everyone's able to attend the meeting synchronously. And so just having, it's cultural, right? In the first few times, it might feel awkward that why is every single stand up or every single, team sync being recorded? But after that, it becomes really second nature, where it's like, okay, I know that 80% of the team is here, but 20% of people might want to kind of refer back to what we discussed, right? So so we do that, obviously over communicating, making sure that we have really clear systems for project tracking and accountability, and then of course if there's a possibility of leveraging any kind of time zone overlaps for synchronous collaboration, we try to do that, right? So typically, I'm in Asia Pacific, I'm in Singapore. I try to start my day at 7 a.m. So it gives me at least a 3-hour overlap with my West Coast peers, right? And then similarly, the folks in India might start the day later, but it gives them some overlap, right, with the West Coast, and of course, overlap with London later in the afternoon. So things like that, I think the combination of synchronous and asynchronous collaboration really helps. The other thing I would say is that because everyone has gone remote, I actually think that it has leveled the playing field in many ways, right? So now it's not as if 90% of the team is building in one location and then we are the odd one out. It's like everyone is remote in wherever the world they might be. And so everyone's a little bit more intentional and a little bit more aware. And I think that's really helped our cause.
Yeah, that's a really, Sweta, sorry, you were going to add?
Yes, one is when the decision making is still within the organization and within the decentralized teams, it's one way to look at it. But when you're working with communities and open source communities and your product is a truly distributed one between open source, the external communities and the internal organization, decision making could be a little more trickier, and it becomes a very influencing act as well. I would say that you not only need to communicate and over communicate, like Sylvanus said, it's also about trying to ensure that others understand the intention of why you're doing a certain aspect of things. So a lot of influencing and trying to align the different people and stakeholders becomes equally important when you're doing the decision making, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to move to the final piece. And I might touch on the pandemic if we have time, but we only have a few minutes left. So I'll go through the career succession, if that's okay. I think it's really important to talk through how you can get ahead. If you're on a decentralized team, how do you, your head offices are effectively in the US. So how do you get ahead in your role? Swara, I'll ask you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, we've tackled this problem in multiple ways. We definitely ensure we have lots of mobility options for people, where we have career progressions within your current role, the trajectory going forward. We also have career progressions in a different role. For example, if you just want to try out something new, that's always an option at Stripe. And within your role, it's always possible to partner with a different business team, for example. So we ensure that we have enough mobility options as possible across roles. In addition to that, one thing that we typically try and do is we have a career plan for each person, and we enforce like a lot of the products that are getting built out of, let's say, EMEA or APAC, or any of our other decentralized teams. We ensure that they have enough, I would say, enough critical mass or like enough actual product to ship, so that it's not like they're just making incremental value additions to what the headquarter has already built. I think that has typically worked as a good motivating factor for everybody who's looking to build a career out of an office that's not the headquarters. And like the last thing I would say is, I think Sylvanus pointed this out earlier, but I think definitely the fact that everybody is remote has leveled up the playing field. which means the only thing that's sort of distinguishing between people in a decentralized team, not in the headquarters versus headquarters, is the time zone. And as long as the communication piece is there, we do allow people outside of the headquarters to be leads or project leads, of tech leads of projects that are not headquartered in their region as well. So that's a career option for some of our folks.
Yeah, and Sweta, how about you? What is your opinion on that? How do you get ahead?
I would say just what to Swara said, right? One is in today's environment, there's a level playing field, and that level playing field actually gives us the opportunities to rotate our roles as well within Red Hat, taking on something or taking on stretch goals which allow you to explore the gamut of management options per se, or technical options. This allows you to actually explore your ability of growth path, both on the technical ladder as well as on the management ladder. And we have done that per se in both the management. How can you rotate roles? How can you rotate roles on the technical side of things? The second, I would say that there are regional roles as well as there are global roles. Identifying both the regional roles and the global roles allows a person to progress in a career and make a jump. And like Swara said, we do have the mobility options. If a person decides, yes, I can play this role probably in much better in a EMEA location, we always enable that. So I would say it's a combination aspect about career setup, rotation of roles, and the progression.
Yeah, great. And Sylvanas, did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to all the great points, I would add that having built my career, I guess, in the US, at headquarters in the US, right? And then more recently, kind of taken on a role as a site lead for a decentralized outfit in a US company. I actually would say something, hopefully that's not too controversial, but I say that with the right company or approach, being part of a decentralized team can actually be a career accelerator. And I think particularly what we're trying with the culture that we're trying to build at Twitter, for example, we've seen people branch out from engineers and data scientists branch out from locations in the States where they actually, maybe they're American or they've worked in the US and they're actually coming to Singapore with a new team, right, to try different things. And I think the pitch is that in a decentralized site, you almost have to optimize for being a little bit more scrappy, right? You have to hustle a little bit harder. So, but that I think translates to a lot more learning opportunities and growth. And the reason why you have to be a little bit more scrappy and almost entrepreneurial or resourceful is that sometimes things are less structured and you gotta kind of make the case for why this team has to exist or what you want to do with this team. But again, I say with the right company and culture, because companies that give you a lot of autonomy and roadway to experiment and try new things, that's where if you come in with the right attitude, you can actually take on a lot more scope than you might otherwise be able to. The other thing about being as a part of decentralized team is that you get to pick up really strong communication and stakeholder management skills, right? Because you have to really learn how to influence and pitch your impact and scale your impact. And I think this is really good in terms of opening up growth and learning opportunities down the line. So I don't know if hopefully this becomes commonplace, but I actually think that the job in this site has been the most rewarding and exciting and challenging one yet.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I'm going to have to leave it at that. Thank you all so much.